The Rothschilds. The name is synonymous with old money, secret meetings in closed rooms, wars, central banks, gold, and political influence. This is a family that, over generations, has come to gain unimaginable levels of power and control. For more than 2 centuries, the Rothschilds have placed themselves in central positions of influence that guided our history again and again. But while many have heard the name Rothschild, most don't know how the dynasty actually came to be and what it's up to today. So, in this video, we're looking at how the Rothschilds made their money and gained their power, how they've maintained their influence over the centuries, and why they keep appearing in scandals from money laundering to the Epstein files, showing how deeply entrenched they are in the global system. The Rothschild story begins in Frankfurt, but it does not stay there for long. In the 1760s, Meyer Amschel Rothschild built the family banking base in Frankfurt. Then his sons pushed the family operation into London, Paris, Vienna, and Naples. And that shows the Rothschilds' ambition straight away. The family business quickly became a private European network. The family's modern companies still present themselves around the same basic concept that defined the original family business: trust, advice, and relationships built over generations. Lovely wording, of course, but in finance, relationships is often just another way of saying access before everyone else. And that is the real core of the Rothschild story. The Rothschilds became powerful because governments needed cash and elites needed someone who could move money across borders without asking too many questions. Rich families usually fade after a few generations, but the Rothschilds kept turning their dynasty's identity into financial infrastructure. Even today, among the inner circles at least, the name is a byword for influence and discretion. Among the elite and political class, the Rothschilds have wrapped themselves up in a nice, neat, respectable package. And managing this reputation is not a separate focus from maintaining the family's power. It's one of the chief ways that their name has endured down the generations. In other words, this public respectability is part of the power structure. If a dynasty can finance states, endow culture, advise companies, and serve the elite of society, then it has social insulation, and that's far more powerful than money alone. Now, to be clear, we're not saying that every Rothschild's cousin controls the weather from a velvet-covered chair, but this family repeatedly appears where private finance runs across public decision-making, and that should make any person with an ounce of skepticism take notice. But to see how this dynasty formed, we have to start before the glossy family offices, before the luxury estates, and before Jeffrey Epstein. We have to start with a Frankfurt money business that figured out how fragile states can be. But before we do that, you can probably tell that doing a deep dive into a family this extensive with this much history was a tall order. It takes our research team quite a bit of time. Luckily for you, though, all you have to do to stay informed on topics like this is to sign up for the Finance Bureau newsletter. It's absolutely free and we cover moves across markets, macro, politics, and more, so you don't miss what matters. All you have to do is click the link in the description or scan this QR code on your screen. And now, back to 18th century Frankfurt. Meyer Amschel Rothschild started the humble family business, focusing on things like court finance and local patronage. Small potatoes compared with what came later, but that was the starting point. As the business grew, Amschel developed a simple family system. He put trusted sons in major financial capitals, kept ownership close, shared information inside the family, and turned loyal blood ties into a business structure competitors couldn't really copy. Nathan Meyer Rothschild was the son sent to London. He arrived in Britain in the late 1790s and actually got started in Manchester's cotton trade. But he quickly moved toward business that would largely define the family name: precious metals, securities, and government finance. And that move from textiles to money is particularly important. Cotton made cash, which is nice, but bullion made influence. Once Nathan was dealing with gold and bills instead of fabrics, he was then in a position to help states solve wartime money problems. During the Napoleonic Wars at the beginning of the 19th century, Britain needed to pay armies and allies across Europe, and the Rothschilds were in the right place at the right time, helping finance British military operations against Napoleon. The family's reputation thus shifted from successful merchants to geopolitical bankers, and with this, Nathan Rothschild became a paymaster for Britain's war effort on the continent. Behind the ugly fighting and inspirational speeches, armies needed coin, and governments needed credit, and suppliers needed payment, and bankers are always there to take their slice. The Rothschilds became central figures in historical wars because they could make money move when states were desperate. Information was, and still is, part of the Rothschild power structure. Their private courier network and family branches meant the Rothschilds could know market-moving news faster than most rivals. In markets, having access to information faster is not trivial. Needless to say, the Rothschilds came across countless free money situations because of this infrastructure. Remember that this is a world before instant communication. Information moved at the speed of horses and ships. The Rothschilds built a family network that took advantage of that delay and turned it into profit. After Napoleon, the family didn't step back. They pressed further into sovereign borrowing. Government bonds became a core product, and the Rothschilds' name eventually became a signal that a loan could find buyers. Bear in mind that a sovereign bond is essentially a government asking private markets to believe in its future, and the bankers arranging that sale sit between the state, investors, and the next political crisis. One early example of this was an 1818 Prussian government loan. Even at that stage in history, European state finance and the Rothschilds' name were inseparable. There were also examples like Brazil, which tells you just how far-reaching the model actually is. In the 1820s, Rothschild-linked finance helped Brazil handle the debt politics around independence from Portugal. Again, the Rothschilds were getting into the fiscal bloodstream of new states. By the 1850s, the Rothschilds became Brazil's financial agents in London, handling borrowing and becoming involved with fiscal, commercial, and even exchange rate policy. Foreign governments were basically dependent on a private household. So the popular idea that the Rothschilds took over the world starts to sound a bit less sensationalist. It wasn't a takeover by flags and armies. The financiers took over by dependency. A government needs a loan. The banker is happy to arrange a loan and earn some interest, all while learning things outsiders cannot. Now, a desperate government is one thing, but a desperate central bank is another. In late 1825, the Rothschilds supplied a large volume of gold to the Bank of England when the bank was running desperately short. And let's think about that for a moment. A private family banking house had enough bullion market reach to help Britain's central bank through a crisis. Remember that this is the 19th century Britain, then the world's dominant power. And to whom did the empire turn when it needed help? The Rothschilds. The family later became even more embedded in the gold trade and became an official Bank of England bullion broker, building a reputation around precious metals few could match. But this entrenchment went beyond business relationships. Alfred de Rothschild sat as a director of the Bank of England from 1868 to 1889. So, not only did the family have extremely strong business ties with central banks, they even found their way directly into the institutions themselves. The Rothschilds' position in the gold market would continue to enhance their influence over decades, even centuries. In 1919, London's top bullion dealers created the London Gold Fixing, basically the daily benchmark price for gold set by a tiny club of banks and used across the gold market. And that fixing was held at, you guessed it, Rothschild bank offices. For decades, one of the world's most important gold price rituals literally sat under the Rothschilds' roof. It was only in 2004 that N.M. Rothschild & Sons officially withdrew from commodities trading and the gold fix, and the firm had chaired the process for almost a century. But let's go back a bit and switch focus to North Africa. Yep, this family history is taking us all over the world. In the 1800s, the Suez Canal was one of the most important places on Earth, a man-made waterway through Egypt that let ships travel between Europe and Asia without going all the way around the Horn of Africa. In 1875, Egypt's ruler was desperate for cash and moved to sell the country's shares in the Canal Company. Britain wanted them fast, but Parliament was not in session. So, as you might expect, the Rothschilds stepped in and advanced £4 million, letting Britain secure the shares. So Rothschild credit gave the mighty British Empire the speed to lock down one of the world's most strategic trade routes, and Parliament only approved the money after everything was already finalized. This level of influence is why this family never really needed a public office to impact public outcomes. A loan here, a bond there, whispers back and forth, a gold supply during a crisis, and before you know it, we have a situation where private banking is controlling national strategy. And this political influence has been clear in some of the world's most significant events. In 1917, the British government issued the Balfour Declaration, a short letter supporting the creation of the Jewish national home in Palestine. It was addressed not to a foreign ministry, not to a public body, but to Lord Rothschild, who was asked to pass it on to the Zionist Federation. Now, whatever side you might take on that hot topic, world-changing foreign policy was being routed through the Rothschild name. It's also worth noting that the family has always made a point of enhancing its prestige through philanthropy, arts, heritage, conservation, grants, and cultural institutions. And some of that helped everyday people, sure, but it also gave the family a respectable public face while the banking dynasty stayed intertwined with elite society. The late Jacob Rothschild later carried that concept into modern Britain. Old banking money turned into institutional presence, and institutional presence turned into more and more global influence. And so, this is the modern Rothschild model. It's less obvious than a sitting president or a major war loan, but it's no less powerful. Rothschild & Co., one of the many Rothschild family institutions, presents itself as one of the world's largest financial services groups with thousands of professionals across 50 countries. Dig into the company's financial reports and you'll find all the typical language about accounts, regulatory disclosures, consolidated statements, and the rest. The modern operation is institutional and professional. But once you follow what those institutions touch, you'll see the true story. Let's consider the Rothschilds' advisory banking services, for example. What that really means is that the Rothschilds are integral in mergers, debt restructurings, capital raises, sovereign negotiations, and private deals. They may not own the assets involved, but they'll know all the important market-moving details before almost anyone else. In 2025, Rothschilds & Co. recorded 694 completed global advisory transactions worth $673 billion, and ranked number 2 globally by number of announced mergers and acquisition transactions. They also happen to be ranked number 1 in Europe on that same metric over the last 20 years. And that's access and influence far beyond ordinary deal flow, because at that level, advisory work essentially means sitting close to corporate secrets and the decisions that move markets. In 2024, its debt and restructuring platform advised on roughly 300 financing transactions worth about $250 billion across 46 countries. So the old sovereign debt instinct has not been lost through the generations. It's also worth noting that many of these deals happen in countries that Western media pays far less attention to. Rothschild & Co. was involved in restructurings in places like Sri Lanka, Ghana, and the Bahamas. Governments, creditors, crises, and private advisors all in the same room. Meanwhile, we also have Edmund de Rothschild, the Swiss private banking side of the Rothschild empire. It's separate from Rothschild & Co., and you can only imagine there's a good reason for that. But the name, the family control, and the wealth channel all remain the same. Edmund de Rothschild reported just under 200 billion Swiss francs in assets under management for 2025, which is around $250 billion. And that is private banking at the highest level. This is banking for the ultra-rich who don't like the visibility of ordinary bank accounts. Media has also been a familiar venture for the Rothschilds. In March 2026, Lynn Forrester de Rothschild sold a 27% stake in the Economist Group to Canadian billionaire Stephen Smith. Even exiting that stake shows you where the family had been sitting. And then we have that weird attempt at the whole concept of rebranding capitalism. Lynn Forrester de Rothschild founded the Council for Inclusive Capitalism, a network of CEOs, policy figures, and a whole lot of reform language. Whatever the branding says, it still just sums up to the same elite convening. So rather than resting on the laurels, the modern Rothschild dynasty has continued to press on. Advisory activities, private banking, wealth hubs, media stakes, foundations, and plenty of meetings inside rooms filled with other elites. But when you have all that going on behind closed doors, it's no surprise that some scandals find their way to the surface. Documents from University College London showed Nathan Mayer Rothschild had mortgaged 88 enslaved people in Antigua, used them as collateral, defaulted, and then, get this, tried to recover the £3,000 owed through Britain's government compensation scheme. That was a government scheme created to bail out slave owners after slavery was abolished. Rothschild's representatives later said the company, quote, greatly regretted any link to slavery. Now, while we don't judge people of the past based on the morals of today, the Rothschilds were at the center of one of history's most harmful systems. And importantly, judging by what came later, their moral compass didn't exactly snap back into place. And let's fast forward and switch to the Swiss banking arm for a moment. In 2015, the Edmund de Rothschild unit paid more than $45 million under the US Swiss bank program after the Justice Department described undeclared accounts linked to ultra-wealthy Americans. These were not innocent admin errors. The scandal included sham entities, numbered accounts, offshore credit cards, and structured transfers. Obviously, these are things that people use when they want wealth hidden from tax authorities. In 2017, Luxembourg authorities fined Edmund de Rothschild nearly €9 million for failing to take proper safeguards against money laundering, while the case tied funds to Malaysia's massive 1MBD scandal, where a $4.5 billion was siphoned from a Malaysia state-owned wealth fund. But that story doesn't end there. In 2025, Edmund de Rothschild was hit with a €25 million penalty to settle criminal money laundering and concealment charges tied to that scandal. It was the first time a Luxembourg banking institution had been convicted of money laundering. Now, when you think of modern scandals, few names cast a darker shadow than Jeffrey Epstein. The man needs no introduction, but he styled himself as a financier who moved through elite circles with ease and discretion. And as it happens, records released in 2026 showed that Irene de Rothschild, CEO of Edmund de Rothschild since 2023, maintained long-term personal and business contact with Epstein. A bank spokesperson said he was just a business acquaintance from 2013 to 2019, but those dates are a bit of a problem. Epstein's 2008 conviction of sexual crimes involving minors was already public, so it's pretty inexcusable to pretend you didn't know anything until the more recent scandal exploded on news feeds. The documented Rothschild-Epstein connection runs years after the conviction. Le Monde reported that Epstein acted as an unofficial advisor to Irene de Rothschild and the Edmund de Rothschild Group from 2013 to 2019. So this wasn't just a passing handshake at some gala. Epstein and the Rothschilds were directly connected. Reporting also says that Epstein's Southern Trust Company had a $25 million agreement tied to, quote, risk analysis and advisory services connected with the Rothschilds Group's US tax problems. And that doesn't really sound like casual networking. And after the files came out, Edmund de Rothschild said its board would monitor the situation. And that phrase says a lot. If a private bank had to reassure clients after the Epstein files dropped, the family name takes a bit of a public hit. French investigators later searched Edmund de Rothschild's Paris office in an Epstein-linked probe involving alleged sharing of confidential UN materials. The bank said it was cooperating, but the shadow around the Rothschild network only got murkier. And as if all of that wasn't enough, there was also allegations against Sir Evelyn de Rothschild after his death in 2022. Several women accused him of using his position as chairman and CEO of NM Rothschild to harass or sexually assault them. Rothschild & Co. later told staff he left in 2004 after a sexual misconduct complaint. Now, you might say these are just allegations against one man. But, as you can see from all we've covered today, it's all part of a much bigger story about status and what old financial power can get away with. The Rothschilds family rose from a relatively modest Frankfurt banking house into the prime broker of global finance with incredible speed. They may no longer sit as visibly at the center of empires and global finance, but maybe that's the point. The influence of the Rothschilds is less public now, but the family's fingerprints are still everywhere. Dynasties rise and fall, but few are able to endure for centuries. Well, that's all we have time for today, but what do you think? Are the Rothschilds just old money still ticking along in the modern era? Or are they just as powerful as they were when Napoleon was running around Europe? Feel free to get highly opinionated in the comments down below. And speaking of power in the shadows, if you want to learn how one secretive trading firm made billions to beat the likes of Goldman Sachs, then you can watch our video on that right over here. That's all from me today. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. This is Nick, signing off.